kids, this is Mrs. Gouloff. Today I'm going to read chapters 9 and 10 in the continuing adventures, in Opal's continuing adventures in the book Because of Winn-Dixie. So far, Opal has met a number of characters. They've been introduced in the book. Some are adults and some are children. There's Opal, Winn-Dixie. There's Opal's father, Otis, Miss Franny Block, and Sweetie Pie Thomas. Those are the ones that are important so far. And some of those characters have jobs or professions. A job is something that you do to earn money so that you can get the things that you need or want to purchase. So I would like you to think about the jobs that these characters do. And at the end of the story, we'll talk about what those jobs are. So there is one challenge one, in addition to the ones I've mentioned. In chapter 1, Winn-Dixie knocked someone down. And I would like you to think about what the job was that person did. Okay, so we are going to go ahead with chapters 9 and 10. Chapter 9. Just about everything that happened to me that summer happened because of Winn-Dixie. For instance, without him, I would never have met Gloria Dump. He was the one who introduced us. What happened was this. I was riding my bike home from Gertrude's Pets, and Winn-Dixie was running along beside me. We went past Dunlap and Stevie Dewberry's house, and when Dunlap and Stevie saw me, they got on their bikes and started following me. They wouldn't ride with me, they just rode behind me and whispered things that I couldn't hear. Neither one of them had any hair on his head because their mamas shaved their heads every week during the summer. Because of the one time Dunlap got fleas in his hair from their cat Sadie, and now they look like two identical bald-headed babies, even though they weren't twins. Dunlap was 10 years old, like me, and Stevie was 9 and tall for his age. I can hear you, I hollered back at them. I can hear what you're saying, but I couldn't. Winn-Dixie started to race ahead of me. You better watch out, Dunlap hollered. That dog is headed right for the witch's house. Winn-Dixie, I called, but he kept on going faster and hopped a gate and went into the most overgrown jungle of a yard that I had ever seen. You better go get your dog out of there, Dunlap said. The witch will eat that dog, Stevie said. Shut up, I told them. I got off my bike and went up to the gate and hollered, Winn-Dixie, you better come on out of there. But he didn't. She's probably eating him right now, Stevie said. He and Dunlap were standing behind me. She eats dogs all the time. Get lost, you bald-headed babies, I said. Hey, said Dunlap, that ain't a very nice way for a preacher's daughter to talk. He and Stevie backed up a little. I stood there and thought for a minute. I finally decided that I was more afraid of losing Winn-Dixie than I was of having to deal with a dog-eating witch. So I went through the gate and into the yard. That witch is going to eat the dog for dinner and you for dessert, Stevie said. We'll tell the preacher what happened to you, Dunlap shouted after me. By then, I was deep in the jungle. There was every kind of thing growing everywhere. There were flowers and vegetables and trees and vines. Winn-Dixie, I said. Heh, 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 I heard. This dog sure likes to eat. I went around a really big tree all covered in moss, and there was Winn-Dixie. He was eating something right out of the witch's hand. He looked up at me. This dog sure likes peanut butter, she said. You can always trust a dog that likes peanut butter. She was old, with crinkly brown skin. She had on a big floppy hat with flowers all over it, and she didn't have any teeth, but she didn't look like a witch. She looked nice, and Winn-Dixie liked her, I could tell. I'm sorry he got in your garden, I said. You ain't got to be sorry, she said. I enjoy a little company. My name's Opal, I told her. My name's Gloria Dump, she said. Ain't that a terrible last name? Dump? My last name is Baloney, I said. Sometimes the kids at school back home in Watley called me lunch meat. Ha! Gloria Dump laughed. What about this dog? What you call him? Winn Dixie, I said. Winn Dixie thumped his tail on the ground. He tried smiling, but it was hard with his mouth all full of peanut butter. Winn Dixie, Gloria Dump said. You mean like the grocery store? Yes, ma'am, I said. Ooh-wee, she said. That takes the strange name prize, don't it? Yes, ma'am, I said. I was just fixing to make myself a peanut butter sandwich, she said. You want one too? All right, I said. Yes, please. All right. Oh, sorry. Go on and sit down, she said, pointing at a lawn chair with the back all busted out of it. But sit down careful. I sat down careful, and Gloria Dump made me a peanut butter sandwich on white bread. Then she made one for herself and put her false teeth in to eat it. When she was done, she said to me, You know, my eyes ain't too good at all. I can't see nothing but the general shape of things, so I got to rely on my heart. Why don't you go on and tell me everything about yourself so as I can see you with my heart? And because Winn-Dixie was looking up at her like she was the best thing he had ever seen, and because the peanut butter sandwich had been so good, and because I had been waiting for a long time to tell some person everything about me, I did. That is the end of chapter 9. And because of Winn-Dixie, chapter 10. She's still in the garden with Gloria Dump, and she's told Gloria everything about herself. I told Gloria Dump everything. I told her how me and the preacher had just moved to Naomi and how I had to leave all my friends behind. I told her about my mama leaving, and I listed out the 10 things that I knew about her, and I explained that here in Naomi, I missed mama more than I ever had in Watley. I told her about the preacher being like a turtle, hiding all the time inside his shell. I told her about finding Winn-Dixie in the produce department, and how because of him, I became friends with Miss Franny Block and got a job working for a man named Otis at Gertrude's Pets, and got invited to Sweetie Pie Thomas's birthday party. I even told Gloria Dump how Dunlap and Stevie Dewberry called her a witch, but I told her they were stupid, mean, bald-headed boys, and I didn't believe them, not for long anyhow. And the whole time I was talking, Gloria Dump was listening. She was nodding her head and smiling and frowning and saying, and is that right? I could feel her listening with all her heart, and it felt good. You know what, she said when I was all done. What? Could be that you got more of your mama in you than just red hair and freckles and running fast. Really? I said, like what? Like maybe you got her green thumb. The two of us could plant something and see how it grows. Test your thumb out. Okay, I said. When Gloria Dump what Gloria Dump picked for me to grow was a tree. Or she said it was a tree. To me, it looked more like a plant. She had me dig a hole for it and put it in the ground and pat the dirt around it tight, like it was a baby and I was tucking it into bed. What kind of tree is it? I asked Gloria Dump. It's a wait and see tree, she said. What's that mean? It means you got to wait for it to grow up before you know what it is. Can I come back and see it tomorrow? I asked. Child, she said, as long as this is my garden, you're welcome in it. But that tree ain't going to have changed much by tomorrow. But I want to see you too, I said. Said Gloria Dump. I ain't going nowhere. I be right here. I woke Winn-Dixie up then. He had peanut butter in his whiskers, and he kept yawning and stretching. He licked Gloria Dump's hand before we left, and I thanked her. That night, when the preacher was tucking me into bed, I told him how I got a job at Gertrude's Pets, and I told him all about making friends with Miss Franny Block and getting invited to Sweetie Pie's party, and I told him about meeting Gloria Dump. Winn-Dixie lay on the floor waiting for the preacher to leave so he could hop up on the bed like he always did. When I was done talking, the preacher kissed me goodnight, and then he leaned way over and gave Winn-Dixie a kiss too, right on top of his head. "You can go ahead and get up there now," he said to Winn-Dixie. Winn-Dixie looked at the preacher. He didn't smile at him, but he opened his mouth wide like he was laughing, like the preacher had just told him the funniest joke in the world. And this is what amazed me the most. The preacher laughed back. Winn-Dixie hopped up on the bed, and the preacher got up and turned out the light. I leaned over and kissed Winn-Dixie too, right on the nose. But he didn't notice. He was already asleep and snoring. Okay, that is the end of today's reading. And I hope you thought about those jobs before we got going. The first character that we were introduced to was Opal. And Opal is a child. And she didn't have a job when that chapter started. But at the end of it, she did have a job. She was in charge of cleaning up around the pet store. So we call that job maintenance, somebody that takes care and maintains someplace, like Mr. Pham maintains our building. And he does a great job and works really hard. And Winn-Dixie, he is a dog. He doesn't really have a job. He doesn't need to make money because Opal and her father provide for him. Opal's father, what job does he have? Let me see. He does sermons, and he works in a church, and he's in charge of it. So a person who works in a church and is in charge and does the sermons when everyone comes to church, that is the preacher. There's lots of other names for preachers, but she even calls her father the preacher. The other person in the book that she comes across is Otis. She finds him in the pet store. Otis does not own the pet store, so his job is to stock the shelves, sell merchandise to people, give them information about the different pets. And so when a person works in a pet store and does all those things, their job is a clerk. He could also be the manager, since he's the only one that we know of that works in the pet store. Miss Franny Block was a person that she met in the beginning chapters. Miss Franny Block works in a library. She puts the books away. She recommends books to people. She checks them out and checks them back in. And at our school, the person who does that is Mrs. Poor. So Mrs. Poor's job is called media clerk in a school. In the public libraries, they call them librarians. And you could also say Mrs. Poor is a librarian. Those two job names are synonyms. Okay, they mean the same. Two different words, but they mean the same. So a librarian and a media clerk. And Sweetie Pie Thomas is, I think, 5 years old, and she doesn't have a job. The other person, the challenge question was what was the job of the person that Winn-Dixie knocked down in chapter 1? Well, if you remember, in chapter 1, she was in the grocery store, and that's when she was introduced to Winn-Dixie. So the person that Winn-Dixie had knocked down and was standing on his chest, licking his face, was the grocery store manager. And his job was to make sure that the grocery store runs smoothly, and he handles any problems, and he hires people. So that is the end of chapters 9 and 10. I know you were doing a lot of things with jobs recently. And so if you think of a job that you would really like to do in your future, you could write it down and write a story about that and why you would want that job. Okie dokie. Well, thank you very much for listening. And I am going to go ahead and start the next two chapters for you. Have a good day.